Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Us Here podcast, brought to you by the Compulsion Academy. Today I'm going to be talking about the number one consequence of relapsing to porn, and I think this is something which may surprise a few people. Is definitely something I had no idea of in the past when I was in the porn addiction. But having gone beyond this problem, having learned how to rewire my neural pathways, having learned an effective tool to deal with literally every single urge, moment by moment, and never need to worry about this problem again, I have a completely different perspective on relapsing to what I once had. Now, in the past, I used to think the consequences of relapsing were really about feeling shame, feeling alone, feeling isolated, lonely, frustrated with myself, just feeling really disgusted in myself, how have I ended up here again? Maybe even angry at myself again, and there was just a lot of self-deprecation. I really felt just pissed off that I was stuck in this cycle, just trying to stop and then relapsing again, and then trying to stop and then relapsing again, and just going round and round in circles. So that's how my life was in the past, and I used to think the main consequence were those maybe first few days after you've relapsed, where you're just feeling brain fog, you're feeling exhausted, drained, weak, lethargic, and you just have no desire to really talk to other people and socialise or be productive and do work, and all you want to do is maybe eat more unhealthy sort of food, play video games, scroll on social media, watch more porn, and just engage in more compulsive behaviours, right? And it just feels horrible. Okay, now my perspective on things has changed significantly. I went and got training from Mary Paulus, of course. She taught me the Beyond Compulsion method, and since then I've gone on a mission to get this method to more people, because for me it was literally the only thing that ever worked in rewiring my neural pathways and helping me take back control. And since doing this whole work, this training with Mary, and then getting it out there to the world and implementing it myself, a lot has changed. In terms of how I think about addiction, it's completely transformed. It's so different to what it once was. I look back on old books that I once read, and I'm quite appalled by the amount of helplessness, the language that people are using around addiction, and just the absolute nonsense and misinformation out there. Because the number one consequence of engaging in any addictive behaviour, it isn't just the shame, the tiredness, the exhaustion, the frustration, the self-deprecation. It's not all of that. The number one consequence is you do it once, you're strengthening those addicted neural pathways. You're going to want to do it again, basically. You do it once, you act on that desire one time, now you're going to want to do it again and again and again. And I never understood that. I never realised it. But it's acting on the desire. It's relapsing. That's what creates the desire to relapse again. That's why we work with guys from all over the world who have been in this addiction, not for just a few days, not for just a few weeks, not just a few months, it's years. Often it's decades. It truly is. We work with a lot of guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They've been in this addiction for, 30, 40 years, some of these guys. And we also obviously work with guys who it's just been a few years for sure. But so far, I don't think we've ever worked with someone who's just had this problem for maybe a few months. It's usually years. It really is. For me, it was about 10 years at least. Looking back on it, it was probably even more, but I hadn't even realised for 4 years I was addicted. I just had no idea. I was oblivious because I wasn't trying to stop the behaviour back then. So the biggest consequence is that you're going to want to do it again. And to me, I now realise that engaging one time, that's what puts you back into an addiction. You're either in the addiction or you're on the straight line. When you're on the straight line, what you're doing on the straight line is moment by moment, you're responding to the compulsive desires in the correct way. You're seeing these as opportunities where you get to rewire your brain. That's what we do anyway. With the 5-fact script, any single urge, you're responding to that with the script to actively, very proactively attack and change that neural pathway. That's what you do on the straight line. You do that moment by moment. What's going to happen? The brain rewires, right? And the desire is going to lessen over time. You're going to start to feel more and more comfortable, and you're not going to be in this fearful state where you're scared of getting out of control or anything like that at all. In fact, what I'll do actually, I'll bring up a couple of examples of that as well, because this week, so we have like a School Beyond Compulsion Academy program. It's like an online program, right, where we have all of Mary's training videos, we have loads of videos from myself as well, and then we have like a community as well and 2 group calls a week. And I posted in there this week about how the intensity of those desires does decrease through the repetition of the script. And we had a couple of comments from guys. One of them, he said, because he was basically just like agreeing with this from his experience. He said 100%, in the beginning, I was constantly terrified of failure and of slipping, and I chose to use my script as much as I possibly could. Going to bed every night was nerve-wracking, as I knew I would experience tons of urges and junky thoughts. Now, about a month in, I feel much better. I still use my script a lot, but the fear is gone, and there are gradually fewer and fewer scenarios where I feel compelled to use the script. I have so much less fear in every situation, and I feel great. That's important. That is key. You know, we want our clients to be in a position where they actually feel empowered for themselves. They trust themselves. And really the goal for every client is to get them into a position where through working with us, they can get to a position where they literally just never need to worry about, you know, compulsive desires or solving this problem or, you know, how do you deal with any kind of urge? You know, that's the goal. It's for every client to basically go off on their own and be like, yep, I'm good now. You know, I've changed the way I think so much. I've changed my neural pathways so much that this isn't an issue anymore. You know, I'm beyond it now. And yeah, sure, you may still have the compulsive desires from time to time, but you're just like, oh, here we go again. Here's the addictive part of the mind. Nothing to worry about, you know, because you can see that there's a separation between the addictive part of the mind, the rational self, and the child self. Once you've separated those and you understand where these thoughts are coming from, it just, the fear starts to lessen, because you have the addictive part of the mind spouting some junky thoughts or unanswerable questions, and you're just like, oh yeah, another junky thought, another unanswerable question. You use the script, you change that neural pathway, and that just becomes how you deal with this problem. There's no fear, there's no worry, there's no doubt around relapsing. Another example here is, yeah, for sure, the frequency decreases through repetition as well. In the beginning, it felt like every downtime moment was met with a thought, feeling, or compulsive desire. The addictive part of the mind, or as we call it, the apotem, refuses to be ignored. Each is a rewiring opportunity. Take it, trust the process. You know, again, trust the process. That's what it's all about, right? People think addiction recovery is about some deep trauma, some void, and there's all these unanswerable questions around it. It's not. It's about a brain wiring. It may have started due to some trauma or some void perhaps many years ago. Once your brain's wired to desire, wired to like crave, and it feels like this craving, you know, for like porn and stuff, well, actually what you're going to go into is a state of withdrawal. When you're in that state of withdrawal, you're like, your brain's out of check. You know, there's this imbalance sort of going on, and you've got to kind of restore that balance again by dealing with the compulsive desires correctly, moment by moment. And what happens is eventually things just get like easier and easier, and you feel more and more in control. And you know, the addictive part of the mind would probably say something like, oh yeah, there's this imbalance, so that's why I relapse. Whereas we would be like, no, there's such a big space between the reason you want to do it, the desire, and this brain wiring, and then how you actually respond. It's in that space between the desire and the response. Like, that right there is your opportunity to rewire your addictive neural pathways. And it's pretty insane what you can do once you know how to do that. And it is a skill, it is an ability, it's something that does require like intensive training, a very specific sequence of training, which is why we've built the Beyond Compulsion Academy, of course. But all to say that ultimately, you know, the number one consequence of relapsing is you are going to be back in that addiction indefinitely. On this straight line, you're just dealing with the urges, and as I've just kind of said, you know, over time these desires lessen and lessen and lessen, and things just get easier and easier and easier, and you feel more and more comfortable, more self-trust, you feel more confident, you know, and you can start to actually enjoy your life a little bit more with a bit more peace of mind, right? But if you chose to engage just one time, right, you're back in the addiction, and now you're going to have all of these junky thoughts times a million, unanswerable questions, all this discomfort, all this desire, and it's going to be very, very difficult from that position. And for anyone in our program, we would say, look, just start the training phases again, because now you're back in an addiction. And we really separate out the training phases from actually being prepared to stop this behaviour correctly. Without the training phases, you are not prepared. If you were to choose to engage just one time, right, you're back in the addiction, back into the training phases, start that again. We're going to go through the sequence, we're going to go through the training, and we're actually going to rewire and get on this straight line in the correct way. It's really, really critical. A lot of people out there, they're just on this zigzag, you know, they're maybe going on a streak for a few weeks or a few months, then they relapse, they're back in the addiction, then they go on another streak, then they relapse, and it's just this constant up and down, up and down, up and down, without ever being truly free. And that cycle lasts years and years and years. So, you know, you want to zoom out and see addiction for what it is. It's not just about those immediate, you know, first few days consequences. It's about being in an addiction. You're either in it, or you're on the straight line, and you're actually proactively rewiring your brain moment by moment, feeling in control of yourself, self-trust, and life's just infinitely better on the straight line as opposed to being in the addiction. So that's my perspective on it. Hopefully it helps someone. I know it's a little bit different to other people. I know it's quite harsh. It's very uncomfortable to hear. If you are listening to this, then, you know, you're one of the few who are actually prepared to face some very, very difficult truths, which is courageous of you. So big respect to you for being here, listening. I hope it can help a little bit. Now, thank you very much for listening or watching. I hope this can help somebody. If you would like to do some more self-reflection, I recommend taking the compulsion test. I'll leave a link below and you can get a score out of 100. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.